All right, good morning, class. It's 2:30 in the morning. Some of you are still up Snapchatting. I'm up with sick children. I'm not going to be in school today. Instead, I'm going to do my best to give you a very exciting lecture about the Bill of Rights. So first, you're going to need to go to Classroom. If you're listening to this video, you should see the link to the Bill of Rights document, which looks like this below the lecture. What you're going to do is, as I explain the different amendments, you can write what the amendment means in this box and the historical events I describe that provide the historical context for each amendment. I filled in a couple for you already just to give you an example. If you need some additional help with it, you can look in your text on pages 236 and 237. And then there's some practice at the end here related to the Bill of Rights situations. I'm also going to post some practice for federalism for you to work on that a little bit. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. First of all, the Bill of Rights represent the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Amendments are changes to the Constitution that requires 2/3 of Congress to agree on it and 3/4 of the state. So the amendment process itself was designed to be difficult so that changes to the Constitution were difficult. But the writers of the Constitution did recognize that there may need to be changes made. So they created the amendment process to make changes to that. In the history of the United States, there's only been 27 amendments to the Constitution, and 10 of them all happened with the addition of the Bill of Rights in 1791. So the other 17 happened after 1791, which is pretty incredible. And 2 of those amendments actually dealt with the same topic, and that's prohibition. One amendment prohibited the production of alcohol in the United States, and another amendment repealed that same amendment. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights, and we're going to explain it with historical context. So I'm going to explain to you what each Bill of Rights means, and then give you the historical reasons why the colonists thought that amendment should be added to the Constitution. So the First Amendment to the Constitution is one of the amendments that has a lot of stuff in it, and it has a lot of our citizen rights. I like to think of the First Amendment as the Raps Amendment. Back when I was a teenager, hip-hop and rap was becoming popular. You guys have probably heard of P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Sean Puffy Combs. But anyway, that kind of music wasn't played on the radio, and it wasn't mainstream, and it was just starting to become that back in the early 90s. But rappers were controversial at the time because they had some lyrics in their song which, a lot of people didn't like to listen to, or a lot of people didn't understand. And so a lot of times they, weren't played on the radio. But the First Amendment did give them the right to free speech, the right to say whatever they wanted, as long as it did not harm another person. And that is a key part of the First Amendment. So the First Amendment has several key parts. And again, I like to think of it as RAPS: religion, assembly, petition, press, and speech. And notice how the amendment is written. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof. The way that they phrased the amendments, they wanted to make sure that Congress knew that this was something that they could not do. They could not take away people's right to practice religion freely, take away people's right to speak freely, the right of the press to print things that were true, the right of the people to peacefully assemble and petition the government, which means get together and protest or write letters to the government or petition the government for problems that they had. So some of the historical events that lead to this was the John Peter Zenger trial in New York in the 1740s. John Peter Zenger was a newspaper editor who was very critical of the royal governor of New York, and he was put on trial for printing things in the newspaper. What he printed in the newspaper, however, was true, and so he was let go, found not guilty. And this became one of the foundations for free speech in America. Related to the religion piece, Puritans in Massachusetts, Quakers in Pennsylvania, all set this standard for not having a state religion. And of course, in Rhode Island, there was the establishment of free religion in Rhode Island. So these were all sort of the historical precedents for this particular amendment. The Second Amendment, citizens are allowed to own guns as well as use them so the states can have a militia. This is one of the more controversial amendments. It's been interpreted by the Supreme Court, because remember, it's their job to judge laws in the Constitution. This amendment has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to say that Congress, the national government, cannot take away our rights to own weapons. Now, what that specifically means has been different at different periods of time, but overall, Congress can't take away our right to own guns as well, so that the states may have a militia. So some of the historical foundations for this is that militias were established to fight the British, the Boston Massacre, which of course there were American citizens killed by British soldiers, and also the Suffolk Resolves, which Massachusetts met in Suffolk, Virginia, and wrote a resolution that said that states should be able to form militias in defense of themselves, particularly against the British. The Third Amendment, citizens will not be forced to house soldiers in peacetime unless a law is passed. So the British in Boston were asking colonists to house soldiers through the Quartering Act. And so in the Constitution, the writers of the Constitution, the Americans felt that it would be important to say that Congress cannot force people to house soldiers in peacetime unless there's a specific law or it's a time of war. So again, the historical foundation for that is the Coercive Acts of the Quartering Act. The Fourth Amendment, this is one of the three amendments that we're probably most familiar with if you watch any crime shows, like if you've ever seen Law and Order or anything that is a police drama. The right of people to be secure in their houses, papers, and effects shown against unreasonable search and seizures. This is when the police come to your door and say, ma'am, we have a warrant to search your home. This amendment requires the state and the police to have a warrant, to have probable cause, to have a specific reason to search your home and take your property. This has also been interpreted as the Privacy Amendment, that you have the right to privacy, where it says here, be secure in your person's house's papers. You have privacy in your own home. And some of the historical context for this is Americans remembered the writs of assistance and the Coercive Acts, which allowed British customs officers to search their home and take their property without their consent. The Fifth Amendment, I already wrote this down on the sheet for you because it's pretty complex. And the Fifth Amendment is also one of our sort of criminal amendments. The Fifth Amendment has to do with due process, or the process by which the government has to go through to take away your life, your liberty, or your property. So there are several parts in the Fifth Amendment that protect someone who has been accused of a crime. First, you can't be put on trial twice for the same crime. Now, what this means is the same exact crime. So a lot of students always like to ask me, it's like, wait a minute. So if you commit a murder of someone and you're found not guilty, then you can never be convicted of murder again? No. If you are convicted of the murder of Thomas and you are found not guilty for the murder of Thomas, then you can never be found guilty for the murder of Thomas again. My example for this every year is O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was is a Hall of Fame professional football player who in the 1990s was accused of killing his wife and his wife's boyfriend. He was found not guilty of doing that, and so he got off. And then in 2005, he authored a book called If I Did It, basically explaining if he had killed his wife and his wife's boyfriend, this is how he would have done it. Basically saying, hey, I killed my wife and I got away with it and I can never be charged with it again. So that is a key piece of the Fifth Amendment, that you can't be put on trial for the same crime twice. And the idea is that the government gets one chance to get it right, to find you guilty of a crime, and they can't keep doing it over and over and over and over again. The government can't take away your property unless it's for public use and they have to pay you. So if the government wants to build a road through your land, they can take it, but a road is an example of public use, and they have to pay you for it. They can't just seize your property and do whatever they'd like with you. And the last piece is another one that we're probably familiar with, is I plead the fifth. In court, you're not allowed to be pressured into testifying if it could hurt you. So if you are forced to take a stand, or if you're forced to answer questions by the police, or even by your principal in some cases, you could say, I choose to take the Fifth Amendment, which means I choose not to say anything because I could possibly harm or incriminate myself. So there's several historical foundations for this. The Proclamation of 1763 took away people's property. The British would often accuse people of things and make them testify if they didn't want to. So the colonists wrote this down to say, hey, these are rights that we believe we should have for accused of crimes. The Sixth Amendment, again, is if you are accused of a crime, there are a variety of pieces to this one that are very important to you. So you have the right to a quick trial, and you have the right to be told what you're specifically being prosecuted for. You have the right to know and question the witnesses accusing you of the wrongdoing. So the state can't just say, yeah, we have these witnesses that say they saw you, murdering Thomas. And say, well, I would like to see these witnesses, and I would like to question them to see if they are truthful. You have the right to force people to testify for you. So if you know someone has information that could find you not guilty, you have the right to make them testify in court. And you also have the right to an attorney to defend you in court, so you don't have to do it on your own. So when you put the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment together, you get the Miranda rights that we so often hear in police dramas, that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. And you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you by the state. So the Fifth Amendment is the right to remain silent, and the Sixth Amendment is that right to the attorney. We say that to people when they get arrested, so they're very clear of what their rights of an accused citizen are. Some foundation for the Sixth Amendment: colonists were often shipped to England to hold trial, and John Adams' representation of British soldiers from the Boston Massacre, he thought that they needed a fair trial and they needed an attorney to represent them. The Seventh Amendment is the Judge Judy Amendment. Many of us have seen Judge Judy or Judge Mathis or any of those judge shows on TV where there are two citizens who have a dispute, typically over money, and one citizen is suing the other. The Seventh Amendment is the Judge Judy Amendment that gives us that right. So in situations where anyone has a controversy that is more than $20, that was a decent amount of money at the time, you have the right to sue another person to get your property back or to be compensated for any property that they've taken for you. So if I know that Thomas was renting an apartment from me, and he hasn't paid me rent in 4 months, and he owes me $3,000, I have the right to sue him in court. And sometimes you'll see those types of lawsuits on Judge Judy. So, foundation for this is, again, in one of your natural rights, the right to own property, and Americans strongly believe in the right to own property. So if someone takes your property or harms it, you should have the right to get it back. The proclamation of, the Eighth Amendment is our no cruel or unusual punishments or excessive bail for crime. So if you are accused of a crime and found guilty, you can't be punished in a strange or weird way. The exception to this is execution. That is not considered cruel and unusual. We are allowed to execute people even though we do have this amendment. And some historical foundations for this would be military punishments during the Revolution, which we saw. The Ninth and Tenth Amendments are federalism amendments. They create the rights of the people and the rights of the states. So the Ninth Amendment just says that, we listed a bunch of rights in the Constitution, but this doesn't mean that these aren't the only ones that people have, that government really is supposed to protect our rights in general. We just decided to list these specific ones. And there's some historical foundation for that. And finally, the 10th Amendment, this is the clear federalism amendment. It says that states have their own power. They have powers reserved to them unless it's otherwise stated by the Constitution. So this clearly says that, yes, we know we gave the United States government some powers, but the states have their own powers as well. This is the federalism amendment. And the historical foundation for that is self-government in the colonies and the anti-federalist fear of a powerful national government, which got the Bill of Rights added in the first place.